Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
My diet isn't amazing. It's not. But it's good enough to support everything else in my life. It's all about balance in your life. And I'm totally okay with eating out because maybe it impacts my performance, but also not training as much would impact my performance. It's personal. This person values being able to cook and bake her own bread and probably grow her own vegetables over training 5 extra hours a week.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's no right way of doing it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Afternoon Snack Podcast. This is Meredith, one of your lovely hosts, here with Alex. Is she going to be part of the intro?
She's here.
We got a request to talk about our history and relationship with food and if we've ever struggled with guilt or destructive eating patterns or difficult body image. And so we haven't done an episode on that before. So we decided to do an episode on that today. Just a bit of a trigger warning. We do talk about eating disorders and disordered eating. So if that topic is bothersome to you or brings things up, maybe consider skipping this episode as it may not be productive for you or for your mental health. If you do feel good listening to it, we think you'll get a lot out of it. So here we go. Hey, Alex.
Hey,
How's she doing?
she's not doing great.
Well, what's she got going on?
Well, she put an offer in on a house with her wife and she's waiting to hear back to see if she gets it.
That's a big congratulations.
Thank you.
Scary. Yeah. Must be quite a emotional roller coaster.
For her.
Yeah.
It is.
Not knowing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, she's definitely not in a great place at the moment, but she's going to do her best on the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's a nice distraction for her.
Yeah. Interesting that, with everything that she has going on, she would choose now to put an offer in on a house.
I'm sure there's a quote that if she could think of that good quote,
Yeah.
there's probably one now that she could use, but it's like sometimes you can't plan for everything.
Yeah.
And when, the house of her dreams comes up a year and a half or 2 years too soon, you jump on it.
She pulls up her pants. She says, now's not the time, but it is the time.
Yeah. And she goes for it.
I may not feel ready, but I am always prepared.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. She's doing great.
Thanks.
I hope that it works out for her and her
Thanks.
wife. Yeah. Anyways, that's actually how we talk to each other sometimes.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'll come downstairs and I'll be like, she's not doing great. Or like, she's hungry. And Meredith's like, oh, what can I do to help her? It's just like really funny to us.
Honestly, I don't know if there's some psychology there, but it's kind of, not that we are not nice to one another all the time. But there's that whole, you'd never speak to a friend or someone else, like some third party like that. So maybe it shifts us into a kinder mindset. I don't know.
Maybe.
It is funny though.
It
I
is
like
pretty hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you're talking about her and then you start to also refer to yourself as her and she.
Yeah.
It gets really confusing.
Yeah.
Like,
you
who are we
really got to be
talking
paying
about?
attention. And maybe that's what helps too.
Maybe. Yeah. You have to be present.
Yeah.
So
We've had a good number of laughs with that one.
Yeah. We're going to keep it going, I think. But here we are on a Sunday morning having coffee, recording a podcast. Potentially, maybe in our last month in this condo. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I go back and forth.
Yeah. I'm like happy either way. That's what I'm telling myself.
The roller coaster of buying a house is like, you're like, I really want it. But then you're like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
You're like, we put an offer in. I hope we don't get it. But like, you also hope you do get it.
Yeah. And then you imagine yourself, like I woke up this morning and I imagined myself in that house.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, what would it be like to wake up and walk to the bathroom in that house and not in this condo? Even though this condo it's a townhouse. It's quite roomy-ish, but like it isn't quite big enough for us with like visitors, which we have those often.
Yeah.
So
it definitely was like, it was the vacation property and then became full-time.
Yeah.
With like definitely the idea of buying a bigger place here in Fernie in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It'll be fine. If it doesn't work out, then it wasn't meant to be. And we'll just continue to wait. What was it? You wanted to talk about the story. What story was it?
It's not really a story because it happens quite frequently where like, even though we're on the same page a lot, like we do, well, there's two things. We do this thing where I will start to say something and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For instance, if we're driving, it's often in the car. I'll be like, what are you? And you're like, I'm just going over here.
I'm just turning left.
And they'll be like, are you?
Yes. I'm going to stop for the recycling.
So I feel like we're on a really good page. I don't really have to form sentences anymore.
I've become very used to your backseat driving.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
But it's also, you'll come up with a bag and I'll say, ha. And you'll say, it was $15.
It was on sale.
Yeah. You just know where I'm going, probably by my facial expressions. But on the other hand, if you can't talk, so for instance, if you're brushing your teeth or we're on the phone with someone and we can't have a conversation, so we try to do like a silent conversation, you are brutal at signaling and communicating like with your hands.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's like, it's just too much.
No, I'll tell you. You want to know what it is?
I do.
Okay. I am extremely good at playing charades, if you can believe that.
See, that I can't believe.
With one person only, my sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you have to understand, I'm a twin. So I grew up with someone where like our nonverbal communication is on another planet. You can't even begin to understand what we're capable of.
It's a completely different nonverbal language.
It is. My communication nonverbal is like, I'm not used to really having to like overdo it because I've never had to. So all of a sudden, because for some reason you like to ask me questions when I'm like sonicaring my teeth and sitting on the toilet. So you also like
That's exactly, you were doing both when I looked at you and I was like, okay, I'm heading downstairs. Do you want me to take Rue out or do you want me to feed the cats and make the coffee? And the signals that you did were so confusing. At one point, it looked like you had thrown something over your head.
Well, all three cats were up there waiting. So I did 3 points and then I tipped a coffee cup. And I think maybe the coffee cup tip didn't look like that from your vantage. It was too much. But then I looked to the left and there was like an empty toilet paper roll. So I was like, oh, what if I just grab the toilet paper roll and I pretend I'm sipping it?
But still, then I'm like, I can't decipher whether you're saying you'll do the coffee.
Oh.
So you forgot to point at me.
I should have pointed at you.
Coffee.
Okay. The way you asked the question was, do you want me to? So I thought the charade was implied to be you. I see the confusion now. Yeah. On top of it.
So there are moments where I feel like we could win the Amazing Race.
Yeah.
And then there are those moments where I think we wouldn't make it through. Our marriage wouldn't.
I feel like if we did get on the Amazing Race, like if we just stuck to the how's she doing, I think at an absolute minimum, people would be very entertained with our communication.
Yeah.
People would just be like, it would just be the entire spectrum. Like, oh my God, they're so adorable. They're speaking in third person to one another. And then like,
episode 8.
People, you'd be in it. You know, you would experience the rainbow of feelings with us.
I think we would struggle in a big way with any sort of dance competition. And then any navigation would be a problem because you know me. I can't drive. And I can't drive like, I don't do stick, but I also don't do automatic.
Yeah, I mean, you could have just stopped it.
So that means, I mean, I can drive. I prefer not to.
Do they have manual?
So that means I would be on the maps.
Oh,
and
that's problematic.
That's problematic also.
Okay, have you ever watched rally car racing?
Yes.
Okay, so you see how they do it, where like one person's driving and then the other person is literally just like head down navigating, and not navigating like in like a quarter of a mile you're gonna turn right. I'm talking like every 50 to 100 meters, like navigating that way. Okay, so I don't remember how we got connected. I got connected with Red Bull way back when I was in like university. I think it was through the like ski and wakeboard club I had set up. We ended up in Virginia at VIR, the Virginia International Raceway, which is it's just a racetrack where they do like karting and closed car racing and motorcycle racing and stuff like that. But they also have like rally tracks. And there was a Red Bull driver at the time. His name's Matt Johnson. So we went up there with him and we got to like ride along. And it is like butt puckering to be in one of those cars with someone like you're driving through the woods, like on dirt roads in this like beefed up Subaru, like going at a speed that doesn't even make sense. You're like, I don't understand how, number one, this car is still on the ground. Number two, it's still kind of going in a straight line. And like, how do you know where you're going? It was unbelievable. but also like amazing to be in a car with someone who can drive one that well. It's nuts.
Yeah. It is kind of amazing too. It's like a testament to the human brain.
How
that
quick
you can train that.
Yeah.
And be able to handle that speed and like things coming at you that quickly, whether it's the actual track or the course, but also information from somebody else.
Yeah.
And manage it. And it's like training your brain.
Yeah. I
and
noticed
becoming that good at it.
I noticed when I was shifting from, because like we talked about, I'm doing some gravel bike racing and I've done most of my training indoors. And then most of my riding outside over the last year has been either mountain bike or fat bike. Fat bike is extraordinarily slow, but it's challenging for its own reasons. And then mountain biking is, especially cross country, like you're not going super fast. We're not anyways, because of where we live, it's more enduro style. You ride up and ride down. And I'm not a fast downhiller. I just sort of like make my way down. It's not my favorite. What I noticed with switching to the gravel bike outside, which is a much faster bike, like I'm so used to looking a certain distance in front of my front wheel because of the way that I ride in the trails and stuff, that I'm like, oh shoot, I have to actually like look up further ahead because I'm traveling much faster. Yeah. And like that takes getting used to. And my eyeballs were tired.
Yeah.
Because you just like aren't used to like looking up. Anyways. Yeah. But you get used to it like anything else. You know, instead of like on a mountain bike, you're making adjustments for things that are 2 meters away. With gravel, you're making adjustments for things that are 10 meters away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's neat. Yeah. So anyways.
So count us out for charades.
Yeah. Not
is
charades.
What she's saying.
Amazing race. Yes. If you want to be entertained. They were casting Survivor recently and like they'd be filming, I think in May. And that's something I've always thought about applying for. And one of our friends sent it to us because she knows that about me. And I think if it was a different phase of my life, I would definitely do it. I think I could do really well with Survivor, but later, we'll do that later. So you put up an Ask Me Anything, basically asking for podcast topics yesterday. And we got some good ones. But one of the ones, and it's kind of shocking that we haven't recorded really or talked about this in like an organized way. I think we've alluded to it, is our relationship with food. And if we struggle with any kind of disordered eating thoughts, patterns, if we have in the past, like how we live with food, like, you know, does it ever pop up in our mind? Like these things that like, obviously we talk about and we work with people one-on-one. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's kind of our personal history, kind of like a chronological, you know, order with food and our bodies. And, you know, we've been through it. I think it's probably easy to maybe assume that we haven't, but yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I thought it would be interesting to start at when we first were exposed to diet culture.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I was in high school and I went to a small high school, private school. We wore uniforms. So I imagine there's something there that kind of maybe is somewhat like protective. You know, you're not wearing certain clothing. You're not valued necessarily like on that.
Yeah.
I never went to a public school until I got to university, so I can't say for sure. But growing up, I was always like just so obsessed with sports. Mm-hmm. I was never interested in dating. I wasn't that interested in being part of the like high school experience, traditional high school experience. I was kind of like, I had a lot of friends, but I was just a bit more of a floater, I guess you could say. But I do remember one of my friends, name was Kelsey. She said at one point, I think we may have been in like grade 10 or 12. I remember where we were sitting. And she said, I want to lose 5 pounds. And I remember her being fairly skinny, I guess, if you could describe a teenage girl, and wondering like, why? It was just like the first time I was like, what? Why? It didn't even like compute. And then I remember one of my other friends, her parents are doctors. And she told me that Booster Juice, which is like a smoothie company, was a treat for her because it was really high in sugar. And even though I knew better, sort of, because I was like, well, fruit's good for you, I remember that kind of sticking with me. And there was like that question in my head when I would have them, which was frequent. So I would say that was kind of my first exposure, and it didn't have a huge impact on me. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds too. And I go down that whole rabbit hole. I was pretty like resilient towards that sort of thing, I think, because I was so obsessed with sports. And then I would say I became more aware of it, not even really in university. It was more at the end of university and then into my CrossFit world. So I was like maybe a late bloomer to it, which is interesting because my sister ended up struggling with a pretty bad eating disorder in high school and college. Even though we kind of grew up in the same household and we were both really into sports, I don't know if it was her high school experience or just genetics or something she was exposed to that triggered something in her that caused her to go down a completely other path. And it's very somewhat early. Yeah, she dealt with, I think it was like a combination of like binge eating disorder, which I guess, you know, there's anorexia that like, it's just that like binge restrict.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like all anorexia, but there's like, you know, restricting to a degree for a long period of time, for short periods of time, and then like binging. And then with that, I think she told me that she struggled with not being able to force herself to purge.
Yeah.
But she said if it weren't for that, I would probably have like bulimia, which I'm sure is common for people with binge eating disorder. So yeah, she was struggling a lot. And with that came some other mental health issues like depression, anxiety, which I imagine are somewhat correlated. But yeah, that's just to kind of provide a bit of a background on me and then my sister in those like early like high school days.
Yeah. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you ever think, wow, it would be cool to meet up and hang with the tactic coaches and community? Does the idea of bagels and shakeout runs and hangouts with me, Alex, Lindsay, and the rest of our crew and community excite you? Maybe even signing up and running a race with your fellow tackies? That's a fun nickname for our community members. I didn't run that by Alex though, so I don't know. Maybe it will stick. Well, then we have just the thing for you. We are doing a spring meetup that corresponds with the Calgary Marathon. It will be May 24th through 26th in Calgary, Alberta, Alex's hometown and my adopted city. We have a full weekend of events scheduled starting on Friday afternoon with a meetup at the Stampede grounds, culminating in the running of the Calgary Marathon, half marathon, 10K or 5K or 60K if you're into that kind of thing. And of course, a formal group dinner on Sunday night. We did this for the Philly Marathon, but we are making it bigger and better this time around. You can sign up right from our website, but we'll make sure to drop a link in the show notes of this episode. We hope to see you there. It is going to be really, really fun. I would say for me, I became aware of diet culture much younger. The first thing that like jumps out to me, because I started thinking about this yesterday when we started thinking about this episode, I think I first noticed like my friends' moms. That's where I remember sort of like realizing that some people try to control their eating and like to look a certain way. And that was probably when I was around 8 or 9, I would say. And yeah, I remember specifically like 2 of my friends' moms, they were smokers, and, you know, we would spend time with them and they would sometimes talk about, you know, stopping smoking because it was the 90s and I think people were well aware of what some of the risks were. But on multiple occasions, I remember it being said, well, if I stop smoking, then I'm going to get fat because nicotine is a pretty strong appetite suppressant. And so that was the first time I was like, huh? Well, not the first, but one of the first for sure. And then, you know, women in my life talking about eating or not eating, and they'd be tanning in bikinis. These are moms. These are just people who we would spend time with sometimes at our friend's house and stuff like that. So it was definitely like in my understanding at a much younger age. As far as like women in my family, I don't really recall it. I remember my mom was into like fitness DVDs. She would try certain things. So I guess if I were to think back at like what the pattern was with her, it was probably a lot of like trying and failing and trying and failing, just not really sticking with anything outside of like she played like adult league softball for a long time. But I didn't have an understanding of like what that meant. I don't know what it meant now because I can't ask her. And then for me personally, I mean, the first time, like I grew up summer league swimming. So I was outside all the time in bathing suits, but like one piece because that's like what kids wear. And I didn't really like think about it. I don't remember thinking about my body at a super young age. I remember, noticing like, oh, look at the way that my suntan is because of the back of my swimsuit. I think the first time when we were maybe a little bit older, like 12, 13, and our friends are starting to wear bikinis, I think that's when you sort of start looking around a little bit. And I don't know why that starts to happen, but it started to happen. And I did go to a public high school where the range of probably socioeconomic status was pretty extreme. I mean, you had kids that were living in, $1 million, $2 million homes on horse farms. And then you also had kids who were at the poverty line. Like you had the whole spectrum of income levels. And, we were middle class. But I do remember wanting certain clothes, like whatever the trendy thing was. Like, I really wanted a shirt that was like Abercrombie, like stuff like that.
I remember my sister's friend used to go to the US and bring her back Abercrombie shirts. And I was always jealous because we didn't have that in Canada.
Yeah. So it's like super elite.
Yeah.
Here.
Her friend was rich.
Yes. And I played lots of sports in high school as well. I obviously swam, I ran cross country, played soccer, did track and field. Like I was a 4-season athlete and I really love sports. I'm like you. I just want to play whatever people are playing. But I remember, at some point I started sort of coveting the way that other people looked. I remember some of the really athletic soccer players, they looked a little bit different than me, or, not even athletic. I remember the thing back in the 2000s, people would wear these really low cut jeans and then like belly shirts. And I don't know where this came from, but like you've seen how some women have these like back dimples, like basically like right above your butt at your low back, 2 little dimples.
Okay.
That was like something that I wanted.
Okay.
I don't know why, because it's totally genetic. It's just like how
I've never really heard of that.
Uh-huh.
I only recently heard that there's a thing called a Christmas tree in your back.
Yeah.
I was more aware of the thigh gap.
The thigh gap,
where
ridiculous.
I was like, how is this even possible?
But again, it's genetics. It's like, where do your muscles attach?
Yeah.
And like,
how wide are your hips?
So women with wider hips and thinner legs are obviously I have very small hips. My thighs are going to touch 100% of the time. Even when I'm very, very small, thighs still touch.
Yeah.
Very small
your
waist.
bones are touching.
Yeah. Like pretty compact. So that's, I remember thinking that, and I don't know, as far as other beauty standards, I don't know. I was just like very obsessed with the low back dimples. That's the one that jumps out. I don't remember being like overly restrictive with my food in high school. I was always a breakfast eater. We ate lunch. Like, I think it helped that, we were really active. I do remember, so like senior year going into university. So I went to NC State. My sister stayed in Greensboro and did 2 years at a small school there before she transferred to Appalachian in the mountains. And so that was the first time that we separated. Obviously, like we grew up together. And even though it was like 2 hours, an hour and a half apart, like that's a big separation for twins. And I think at the time we were also both struggling with some things going on with our mom and just like personal life. And my sister got what I think is probably somewhat addicted to exercise, specifically like cardio, running, biking, that kind of thing. And then at the same time developed probably a little bit of a like anorexic style eating disorder. She got really, really small. I remember that, but no one said or did anything. You just kind of like, huh. And I mean, that's like pretty typical of my family is you just let people suffer in silence. They used to, they're not anymore. My probably personal history with like eating started after university. In fact, I remember, NC State, if you know anything about the university system in North Carolina and that school, it's massive. It's a huge school. I mean, like 30,000 student body, really, really big. And the campus is really big. And I lived on West Campus in the like honors village, but a lot of my classes were on the other side. So like back and forth, I was probably walking like easily 6 miles a day, maybe more. And I remember thinking like, this is amazing. I can eat so much. And not like, oh, I'm earning my food. Just like I could literally eat whatever I want. I didn't gain a pound in college, like the first couple of years, which is, I think maybe not always the experience. It was after, I would say, I graduated and I was working and, dabbling in some other types of exercise, running, triathlon. I started to restrict my eating. I'm like, okay, I'll just run a lot because that's what you do when you want to like lose weight or you want to, look a certain way. And I was working at the time for a biotech like biopharmaceutical company. And a lot of those days were like long days in the lab because we were doing, process development, pilot scale work. I remember I would buy the like cup of soup, the Campbell's cup of noodles. I would make sure I bought the ones that were under 200 calories. I would make sure I bought the chicken star noodle or whatever, because it was one that was under 200 calories, not over.
And that was lunch.
Sometimes. Yeah, I would say there was like 2 years of that. And in my head, I'm thinking that's normal. Obviously, it's not normal. That's not a sufficient amount of food. I was young, so I think I tolerated it, but I also think that I ate a lot more like late in the day. It's like I felt like I was controlling my eating and I was controlling my calories in a way that was going to be productive somehow. But then like late in the evening, I would just eat because I was really hungry.
Yeah.
And I was active all day.
Very common.
Yeah. But I wasn't exercising super routinely at the time. I was just kind of intermittent. Yeah. And I would say it was kind of finding CrossFit in 2012 that started to shift my understanding of food and what it's for and what's good. Not good as in like good foods, as in like good eating habits and productive eating habits, and started to eat massive amounts of food. Yeah, essentially.
For me, like before finding CrossFit, so I went to University of Alaska. So I was an alpine ski racer, and I spent a year after high school on a national development team.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I was just so sports focused that I didn't really think about my body. Like I've been training weights and in all sorts of different capacities and playing soccer and all these things for so many years. I never, ever, ever, when I was growing up, thought about training as a form to change my body.
Yeah.
I went to university and it was the same. Like I remember there being a bit of an adjustment to the new, like I lived in, what do you call it? On campus. Dorms. And I had access to the food meal plan for the first 6 months. And then I remember thinking, okay, I need to learn how to cook because I definitely knew that it wasn't good. The food there. I don't think I really enjoy the food.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too is like, I was never a big eater.
Yeah.
I didn't really eat breakfast for a long period of time just because I didn't like eating breakfast. And I remember my mom saying, you need to eat this, you need to eat this. But it wasn't like I was trying to restrict intentionally. I also think I didn't notice my body until I was probably 15 or 16 because I went through puberty pretty late. And I don't know if that has an impact.
I mean, probably. Yeah. When you think about
like, I remember my friends would be like wearing full on bras and I don't even think I needed to wear one for a long time.
I mean, like you may not even still need to wear one.
No, I do remember at one point, like noticing, because I was pretty skinny growing up, like a lean kid. I started getting some body fat and I remember noticing that, but I don't remember thinking anything really of it or like doing anything about it. It was just kind of like, okay, I don't really like it, but like, that's whatever. It's weird to kind of explain.
Yeah.
And then in university, that's when my sister passed away and I resorted to exercise for like coping.
Yeah.
And then at that point, actually before my sister passed away, I did Insanity. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I think it was 60 days or something. And it came with a nutrition plan. And the nutrition plan, like most nutrition plans for stuff like that, was pretty extreme.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being any like calories involved. There might have been. I could probably go back and look. But I do remember trying to shift my diet to kind of align with what they recommended. And I remember being hungry a lot. Yeah. But almost like for the first time, liking it. And then also noticing my body change from Insanity. Because that was the first time I maybe had shifted from strength training and ski racing to like high intensity, you're burning a lot of calories. Then I got like abs. Like I really noticed my abs. Yeah. And I remember someone saying something. We were in Vegas with my family watching the UFC fight and someone commented on my abs. And I think that was probably the first time somebody commented on my body. Yeah. And then with the training and stuff, I started noticing my body change, and then CrossFit happened in my final year, right at the end of my university career. And I would say for me, CrossFit probably shifted me in a negative direction.
For a period of time.
Yeah. Like I remember this, and I'm going to read it out loud. It's Fitness in 100 Words by CrossFit. And I'll tell you what stuck out for me and probably caused some disordered eating. So eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise, but not body fat. So that was like the nutrition part.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to go into the rest of it. I didn't really ever do keto or like paleo because I just never did.
Yeah.
I just couldn't let go of bread. But the will support exercise, but not body fat.
That's almost like permission to restrict your eating.
It caused restriction. It basically went from like, I am going to only eat after training. Like I would always have to train first. I would never sit down and eat a big breakfast if I didn't train, whether that was going for a run or a CrossFit class.
Yeah.
Often CrossFit class wasn't enough. So I would run and do CrossFit class, then eat a late breakfast. And like my intake wasn't super low given the amount of activity that I was doing. And then I was doing CrossFit and training for a marathon. And I just got really skinny. And then people started commenting on my body because I was getting muscles, but I was also really lean just because you adapt to CrossFit.
And I think like you have a genetic predisposition towards leanness and probably like a higher threshold for lean mass than a lot of people do.
Yeah. Like I lost my period, but I was still performing well, still getting stronger, still getting better at CrossFit. And then I went to university and kind of continued on.
Yeah.
Then I did an elimination diet, which we've talked about, but I lost 10 pounds, which on my frame was a lot.
Yeah.
And then my performance really started getting impacted.
Yeah. I guess like, I don't know that my experience starting CrossFit was as negative. It was a positive thing in my life at the time, but it really does speak to the power of the people in the communities that you surround yourself with. So like when I was in university, I was close with a lot of the university team gymnasts. I don't know why. My roommate at the time was a gymnast. And so I just spent a lot of time with them. And those girls eat, but they're also like, they have a ton of muscle mass. They like physically look a lot like, I would say, CrossFit athletes, and they're super active, super strong. And that impacted me in a positive way. And then graduated, and the people that I started spending time with weren't athletes. It's not news or a surprise, but I was married for a few years to a man. And honestly, like my in-laws were great, but I had 2 sisters-in-law and they were the type, restrict your eating and run. And so that's where that I think sort of came for me. It was like, well, it's what they're doing, so I got to do it. And then CrossFit sort of pulled me out of that. Okay, now we're going to, support, now we're going to eat. These people eat. And it took some time. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. I started CrossFit in 2012. But I mean, I bought the paleo solution. I read the books.
Paleo OMG, Nom Nom. Like I was doing all of the meal prep and stuff, probably just eating an astronomical amount of fat. I bought the Steve's Paleo treats from Rogue Fitness, the packed jerky with the nuts. I think that stuff has like 30 Putting
grams
butter in your coffee.
Yeah, no, I never did that. I would never ruin a cup of coffee. But yes, that was all positive. And then I started doing some Olympic weightlifting on a competitive level around the end of 2013, 2014, because I just had a knack for that. And that required me to, well, I won't say it required me to. I competed in a lower weight class than my natural body weight at the time. So I was doing, restricted eating for that. I was weight cutting. I was at least twice a year trying to drop 8 to 10 pounds, like intentionally. And that was, I wasn't big. I was never a big person. So it was significant. And then I shifted back to CrossFit and I made this really big effort. And this is kind of where my entrance into really like performance nutrition came from. Was I knew I was too light to be competitive in CrossFit because I was intentionally controlling my weight down for my like Olympic weightlifting. And even when I competed up a weight class, I was still too light for CrossFit. So I sort of committed to, I want to gain weight back, but I want it to be muscle. And so I hammered strength training. I was doing like mostly powerlifting. I was doing some conjugate. I was doing, Widowmaker. I was doing just an insane amount of strength volume. And I was getting really methodical with my eating because I wanted it to be productive weight. And that worked. It worked really well. I never did like a body fat assessment. I don't know what it was. But the weird thing was I basically like trained 8, put on all of this muscle mass, gained weight. Presumably my body fat percentage went down and then lost my period. It's weird when that happens in that direction because like by the numbers, like if I were to go to the doctor, be like, well, have you lost weight? I'd be like, no, I've actually gained 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. They'd be like, huh, weird. Oh, well, but they wouldn't like, there's no, well, how did you do that? What does that look like? And I think at the time it was so much stress. And I think, and I don't have any data to support this, but like we see this happen with people all the time. When you're newer to training, I think especially like maybe a little bit younger, I think it's a little easier to kick yourself into like hyperthalamic amenorrhea.
I've read that. I think it was a study referenced in Girls, that running book, Good for a Girl.
Yeah.
Good for a Girl. They referenced that.
Yeah.
Which made a lot of sense.
Yeah. It was like a year and a half that I didn't have a period. I never went on birth control, which, I mean, we know it doesn't actually induce a real period, but I did a progesterone challenge. I did all the stuff that, you do. I went on a higher fat diet and it didn't come back because I was just training so much and I was unwilling to let that go. Whether that is a good or a bad thing, I don't think it's a good thing. I'm like fine now. I think in hindsight, I probably should have taken a little more care with that particular phase of my life, but I was really having a good time with training. And so it's hard to stop. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't seeing any negative repercussions to doing that. But I don't know if it's hard to say, did I improve aesthetically? Did I visibly change in a way that I liked? I don't remember, looking at myself and being like, ooh, yeah, I like the way I look. Or people weren't necessarily commenting a lot on that, but I really liked the way that I was performing. I liked the way that it felt to build strength and to get stronger. And that, it does look a certain way, I guess. I could probably go back and look at photos over the last 10 or 12 years and tell you exactly when I started doing certain types of training, and there's visible changes that do occur. But at that point anyways, it had shifted to a function. I wanted to be good at CrossFit and I wanted to do what it took to do that.
So we had to stop the recording just now and we got news on the house. And unfortunately, she's sad.
She's
sad. She didn't get the house.
No.
She's pretty bummed out. Part of her is somewhat there's a part that's relieved because it was a big, unexpected offer and jump. But she did want the house, obviously, because she put an offer in with her wife.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you do imagine yourself there, and the things you love about it are the things that you start imagining, like a really nice garage and a bigger kitchen and more space and a nice backyard and all those nice things. But
studio.
At the same time, she's happy where she is now, cannot complain.
No.
And as her mom always says, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll just keep looking. I mean, she and her wife will just keep looking and move forward and buy her and her wife something nice in the meantime to soften the blow.
Hey, she's got free money.
Yeah.
So we love that.
That's a lot
of
money that she now doesn't have to spend on a down payment.
That for her.
All of a sudden, she's feeling rich. Okay, but back to the pod. I just wanted to give you a live update, even though it's not live because you'll be hearing about this 2 weeks later.
It's like a delayed live update. That did just happen.
Okay. Yeah, literally, we just called our
But you
person.
can't, the person who got it, it was unconditional cash offer.
Yeah, which I honestly had a feeling it was going to be that.
That's Fernie. It just happens a lot.
Yeah. There's just people who have money around here.
What do I have to do with my life to be able to cat? Here's a giant sum of cash that I don't need.
Okay, but back to the podcast. So I made it to the games in 2015, kind of by fluke, kind of because I just really loved training. I was still running at that point, running and doing CrossFit. And then after that, my goal was basically to make it back to the games. And I knew that it was similar to you. I needed to get strong.
Yeah.
So I stopped running and focused only on training, what my coach was giving me, which he never gave me any running, although I'd had him for a couple years and I was running on my rest days.
Pause. You actually did set the goal to go back to the games.
Yeah, it was the goal to go back. And I arranged my life like that. I took a year off after law school to attempt at full-time CrossFit.
Yeah.
To try to get back.
How does this play with our goals concept? Or was this before you had started to
I think it was, I'd like to go back. That was an amazing athletic experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to arrange my life with the goal of getting back. So that was the North Star.
Yeah.
That informed what I needed to do on a day-to-day basis, which is prioritize CrossFit, prioritize strength training, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it was a North Star goal, which it didn't really change much. It did change much. It made me take a look at when I wanted to start my career and delay that for a year.
In corporate law.
So I took that year off to do full-time CrossFit. The upside to this, I had a great time meeting you and having the whole year off for us to spend together.
Talk about North Stars aligning.
Right?
Because
you had just done the same thing.
A year and a half off. Yeah.
So at that point, I had shifted towards more strength-based like you, and I was eating for strength. and I wasn't running. I had put on a little bit of weight, and then my coach, I think regionals was coming up. I was through the elimination diet. I had gained a bit of weight back. My coach said, you should get a nutrition coach and like cut a little bit because I think you can lose some weight for performance.
Yeah.
That didn't bother me at all. There was nothing in my brain that said like, that bothers me. And I don't know if my coach would do that now with his athletes. I don't know. But from a performance standpoint, that was definitely the right call.
For you.
For me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know it. And I'm glad he said it. It happened that year was very gymnastics heavy at regionals.
Let's just pause for 2 seconds to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that people have the right understanding of like what you just said.
Yeah.
Losing weight does not improve everyone's performance.
Yeah.
I think this is something that has to be assessed on an individual level.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people benefit from just trying to get stronger with certain movements.
Yeah.
At that time, you had been doing this sport for long enough to know where your strength lies, know what you can develop and what you can't develop. And so for you, the easiest dial to turn at that time was losing a little bit of weight.
Yeah. Body fat. And I didn't have a ton to lose.
Yeah.
But I think my coach had known me since he knew me since before that. He had seen my progression over the course of 4 years, I think at that point, working with him closely. He knew my mindset around my body and that sort of thing. We had a really close relationship back then. We would train together. I would see him most days when I'd moved back to Calgary, and he suggested this. That was the first time I started tracking macros.
Yeah.
And that correlated when I met you.
Yeah.
And you knew that like you were kind of involved in me almost learning about macros at that time.
Yeah.
And I lost a little bit of weight, no impact to performance. I was under the guise of a coach. Like he knew what my volume was. Everything was healthy. At the same time, I was learning about macros in a really like healthy way. I thought it was performance driven, even though it was for like fat loss, it was performance driven. Control, the word control can be interpreted in a negative way. But I think at that point, I felt like, wow, I'm understanding how food can really impact the body for performance. And it was exciting for me. And then like living with you, because we basically started living together because it was long distance. I think you at that point in my mind, from what I remember, had a very healthy relationship with food. Like you were kind of tracking because you had a coach, but it was loose and we would go out to eat. And at that point, going out to eat was hard for me because I think a lot of times, and this is what I'm so careful about as a coach now, you're tracking and you can almost get so into, okay, this food impacts my performance. I need to know what I'm eating all the time.
Which isn't how that works.
No, it's not. But I was in that mindset. I think you at that time kind of helped me balance that.
Yeah.
So we would go out to eat. Then I think it was, I started taking rest days more frequently because I wanted to spend time with you. And that was a really good thing. Like I just had other interests that helped balance my lifestyle.
Yeah.
Even though we were both very extreme into CrossFit, there was still a good balance for me. It was healthy.
Yeah.
And then I tracked for 5 years through basically my CrossFit, through work. And I think tracking and stuff through activity changes in my career, having some comfort in all of those really stressful months when I was working.
Yeah.
Like knowing that there was something that I felt could still improve my performance, even though I wasn't training as hard. Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And like, I just wanted to go back quickly. My mom, and if most of you have listened to my podcast with my mom, like she struggled for years and to a degree still does, because I think you can't reverse years and years and years of a certain mindset, certain beliefs, certain values. Like those are very deep rooted things for a lot of people. That history is hard to erase and you never really erase it, but move past it.
I like this concept of everyone has a little voice in their head. And I think it's easy to think that you only have one little voice, but you have more than one. And so when you're dealing with a lifetime of troubled relationship with food and your body, that voice, that part of your brain, that's not going to go away. You can't quiet it. It's just going to be there. The trick is allowing the other voices to just speak a little louder. So you might still like, and I'm sure your mom does, you could ask her like if she feels that voice, if she feels those old feelings creep in, because I bet she does.
Yeah, I think she does. And even some of the old like behavioral tendencies creep up. She comes and stays here where we have all these different cereals. and she's digging into the cereal, which is something that probably was a behavior that she's done in the past, but she doesn't have those cereals at her house.
Yeah. So it's also, there's like an environmental component.
It is, yeah.
Which is to say, there's nothing wrong with not keeping foods that you struggle with in your house. I think sometimes people label that as disordered, but it's not. It's just controlling your environment so you don't have to live with like constantly using willpower, which is not a fun feeling. Anyways, yeah. So you let those other more well-informed voices speak up a little bit more. And I think you start to balance things.
I don't remember what my streak was with not taking a rest day. And I'm not talking about like I did active recovery. I worked out every day.
Yeah.
And like the runs had to be basically 10K for it to count as exercise. Like I went probably 400 or 500 days without a rest day. I ran the day after the CrossFit Games. And still there's part of me in my head that says on a rest day, there's that little voice that says like, you're lazy. You know, you could work out. Just why don't you just work out? But there's a louder voice now that is able to overcome that and say, no, rest days are productive. They allow you to focus on other things. They allow you to get stronger. There's all these positive benefits to rest days. You rely on what the research says, the science says.
But there's also an element of knowing yourself too. You know, with that, we obviously spend a lot of our time together. We work together. We've recently been through, let's say, some pretty stressful periods together. And there have been days where, you know, our training schedule gets modified. Something comes up, just like, you know, on the phone with lawyers, like just things that we didn't plan for. And, you know, we're both stressed out at the end of the day. I'm tired and you go down in the garage and do a workout. I don't. And I wouldn't label that as like coping. I think that there's an element of knowing yourself and what serves you, like from a wellness standpoint, including mental health. And so for you, even after that kind of day where a lot of people would just take the day off, I do because I'm exhausted and doing a workout is not going to help me. For you, doing a workout helps you wind down. It's what you need. It doesn't mean you're doing a whole session or like 2 hours of training, 30 minutes. That's how you wind down. It's part of how you wind down. Me, I put on some music videos and I just sort of like unpack my head. So there's like an element of that too.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess where are we at now?
I'd say like when we were kind of first together in that 2017 to 2018, 19 phase, and I was tracking macros, I had already shifted kind of to, I'm going to use this as a framework. Like I know what feels good on a daily basis and I'm going to be sort of loose with it. And then when it's time to ratchet things up in season, that's when I started to pay a little more attention and use it really to make sure that I was getting in what I needed to, because my tendency is to undereat. And that's how I like people to use tracking, if I can get them to use it that way, which is not necessarily to do it every single day. You do that for a period of time so that you start to learn and develop, you know, an eye for food and understanding. And then you're using that for a framework and to help you make decisions. Yeah, when you are out to eat at a restaurant, you know, a friend's house or whatever, where we're at now. Yeah, I don't track my food. I don't do any of that. I think from a mental standpoint with myself and my body, like 35 years old, 36 in July, and things are changing. But I certainly don't look at myself in the mirror with a magnifying glass, being like, saggy, you know?
I mean, you're 35.
I know.
How much are things actually changing?
I notice my face.
Yeah, I do too. I notice it more when I see old photos of myself where I'm like, oh, I looked so much fresher 10 years ago.
I think you lose some of the connective tissue and like the fat in your face first. But I find for me personally, and I notice this with other people, but me, if I'm feeling good with what I'm doing with my body, like my training, if I'm bike riding, if I'm doing things that I love, if I feel good doing those things, I don't think about the way that I look. I don't think about what I weigh. I weigh myself once every 6 months, maybe. Like, and it's always random. Like the other day we were in the bathroom and I just like hopped on the scale and I was like, well, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Like I'm not critical in that way. I care more about how I feel. And I find that with the people who I work with, one of the trends that I see is when someone is in a really good routine with going to the gym and working out and hitting their fitness goals, they're not talking about their body. I don't hear about it. When someone gets out of their routine, maybe they get sick, things come up at work, travel. If that goes on long enough, I'll start to hear about their body. It confirms to me that correlation is real and that really, I think what a lot of people are after is they just want to feel good doing cool things, strong things, fast things with their body, because that's a great feeling to feel capable. And when you are in those routines, that I think helps you look at yourself in a kinder way. You have more pride for what you can do. Yeah, when you're out of that, it's a little bit harder. But that's why I think that statistic that exercise and training is not particularly important for weight loss or weight management, in that it doesn't contribute in a meaningful way to an energy deficit or energy balance, which it doesn't. And we know that.
It's like 30 minutes of a 24-hour day.
Right.
It's a small percentage.
And oftentimes we'll compensate for that energy use in a workout somewhere else because your body's really smart.
Yeah, like I sit down a lot.
Yeah, if you crush yourself in training, you're probably going to sit more that day.
Yeah.
And you're not even going to realize that that's happening.
Yeah.
So, working out more is not what you do for weight loss. But at the same time, the number one predictor of weight management and sustained weight loss in the long run is someone's exercise routine and their workout habits.
It's like just really goes to mindset.
Yeah. And I think it's easier to take care of other things, take care of yourself when you're putting in work there and you feel good about it. Because you're like, wow, I feel really good. I want to keep doing the things that make me feel really good, not just working out. Because I think there's an understanding that there are a lot of things that contribute to that. And then when you don't have the workout, it's easier to let those things go.
Yeah. I don't track either. I track certain days if I change my diet significantly. So probably a year ago, I changed my breakfast significantly from like a really big bowl of oatmeal and a sausage to like eggs and a bagel with butter. So the fat content in my breakfast went up, and I wanted to see where I was at for the day to make sure that with that breakfast, I didn't need to change another meal in my day. And I remember being like, whoa, I'm eating so much more fat than I ever have. I had like an initial freak out. I'm like, whoa, 95 grams of fat? That's high. But I also knew that I was getting in a lot of carbs. I was exercising a lot. My stomach just does better with like a slightly higher fat content, and I feel good. And so if you look at the data, like there's nothing wrong with that.
I think a lot of people think, obviously, like carbs are your body's preferred source of energy. But it's not like you flip a switch. Like people like to think about carb utilization and fat utilization as in you're flipping a switch and doing one or the other. Most of the time, you're doing some percentage of both. And so it's like having a good amount of fat in your diet is still supporting athletic goals because you're still using that for energy, still contributing to your performance.
Yeah. And I was still getting in plenty of carbs.
Yeah.
Significant amount. So I also track when I'm in certain phases of my marathon training because of carb loads.
Yeah.
I need to plan for those. I want to make sure I'm hitting specific numbers for that because I find that that really, really impacts my performance the following day or the following days. But I don't need to track every single day, partially because my diet is very routine and because I understand that it takes away from other things that I could be doing. I go through bouts, but I probably weigh myself like less frequently than I ever have. And from a body image and body concern standpoint, since starting CrossFit, I've probably been the least amount of concerned. Yeah. I don't know if it's because I train by myself or just with you. I don't wonder what people think of my body. I'm not exposed. It's not in front of people. I think the most that I experienced recently was when we went on that vacation, which I talked about. Other than that, I'm just not aware. I'm more aware of what my body is doing. And I surround myself with people who don't care. And I think, to be frank, that's getting out of the CrossFit space.
Yeah.
It's getting out of the CrossFit space on Instagram. It's not posting without my shirt off in that way. And people commenting like, oh, you're looking lean, or you're thinking that, I just don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to say was my diet isn't amazing.
No,
it's not, but it's good enough to support everything else in my life. We had friends over who eat very nutritiously, I'm going to say.
Like nutrient dense,
like vegetables, fruits. They make their own salad dressing. It's very, and I hate this word, but it like natural, like whole ingredients. Whereas I told them, I'm like, just go to the store and get a rotisserie chicken. And you guys came back with like, we're just going to grill chicken because it's better.
They also didn't have any rotisserie chickens.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's so valid. It is.
Yeah.
And she commented, and not in a bad way. It was more like interest. You, as a nutrition coach, like your diet is more processed than I imagined it to be. And I kind of said, yeah, I know, but it allows me time to go down at 6 p.m. Like last night, I went down, I worked out at 6:30. And I was like, we have to go for dinner. We don't have time to cook. and for me to get this workout in.
Yeah.
And we went for dinner and I had a chicken burger with a salad. We shared some fries. And to me, that's the balance that works for me right now. Going out to eat 5 times a week, including lunches, is okay. Because when I go out to eat, most of the time I'm choosing foods that are nutritious at a restaurant. We go for these like really nice vegetable filling wraps and smoothies for lunch, a couple times a week. And when we go for dinner, like the most least nutrient dense thing that I order, maybe some fries and once a week, my beer. But it's all about balance in your life. And I'm totally okay with eating out because maybe it impacts my performance, but also not training as much would impact my performance.
Yeah.
It's personal. This person values being able to cook and bake her own bread and probably grow her own vegetables over training, 5 extra hours a week.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
There's no right way of doing it. But I found a really good balance for me. And that will continue to shift over time. Busier bouts of work impact nutrition. That's why our nutrition coaching is so personal because your life really directs the balance that you have with your nutrition.
Yeah.
And it can be like a week. It can be several months. It can be several years. It's finding what's good enough so that you can live your life to the fullest. I think looking back on my relationship with food compared to a lot of other people, it's been relatively good. And I'm thankful that I can look back and say I've learned from all of that. I've been able to reflect and find like a really healthy state for me. But it's taken time and it's taken surrounding myself with the right people. So, yeah.
Well, I'm proud of her.
I'm really proud of her too.
Yeah. It's not an easy shift to make. Sounds like she's got some great people in her life.
Yeah. I work with people who struggle with their relationship with food, which is a lot of people. And I wish so much for them to get to a good place because it really does allow so much more space for other things in your life.
It does.
It's really a shame that nutrition and our being so consumed with how we look takes away. I mean, and maybe I am bragging, but I look at myself in the mirror, not even my body. I look at myself in the mirror with my face and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting older, but it's like, it's just what's happening. And I think I've always looked up to my mom in many ways. And I think in this way as well, like she's never, and to each their own, but she's just not that person who like does the Botox thing. She's not the person who wears makeup. She cut her hair because she was like, screw this. I have better things to do than dry my hair every single day. And I look up to that. And I've always been this way. I've never cared particularly about my appearance, but that's allowed me to enjoy life in different ways. So I'm getting gray hairs and I'm like, oh no, not gray. I'm kind of like, oh, cool, gray. I wonder what I'm going to look like.
Yeah. She'll look good.
I think she will too.
Yeah. She'll look good.
And I'm with someone who will accept me no matter what I look like. And that's important as well.
Yeah. What a winding road.
Every day is a winding road.
There it is.
Wow. That sounded pretty good.
That was all right. That was okay.
Shout out to Cheryl.
Shout out to Cheryl.
Talk about aging gracefully.
Yeah, she's doing a good job too.
Yeah.
Cheryl.
Yeah, not
she, Alex. Yeah, I don't know. Just thought this was a great episode. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks for sharing your story as well.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it. I've heard it before, but I mean, you're a very interesting person to me.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, I guess some people ask me if I think about my food at all. Like if I don't track, well, what do you know? Do you think about it? Do you just like constantly think about it? So the only 2 things that I think about are protein and usually fiber. I'm like,
do you ever feel guilt? That was actually the specific question.
No, I don't feel guilt. If anything, if I feel guilt, it's when I've gone like 3 days just like really shitting the bed with protein. Not literally, but like if I just haven't done a good job and I know that, I'm like, ugh, I'm letting myself down because I know that matters for how I feel and my performance and what I want to be doing with my body. But it's not guilt as in like, I shouldn't eat that. It's really like, oh, I should eat more of that.
Yeah. I would say I don't necessarily feel guilt. It's more, oh, that didn't make me feel good. I'm probably not going to do that next time.
Yeah.
Like that time I drank 2 beers instead of 1. And I was like, I will not do that again for like a Friday dinner.
I mean, I eat a cookie with my coffee every morning, pretty much. Like I don't have a lot of food guilt, but I do have like, I mean, I don't want to use the word rules in a negative sense, but if I'm not like 9 out of 10 interested in eating something, I don't eat it.
Yeah.
Like that's
healthy as well.
Yeah. I think if I didn't do that, like, yeah, I would feel differently, but I have a boundary where I'm like, I don't like Black Forest cake. I'm not going to eat that. I would never, even if it's someone's birthday cake, I'm like, that's not for me. I don't like that cake.
Yeah. There was a day the summer where we went for sushi and then we went for ice cream after. I definitely didn't feel good. I was too full.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh, I shouldn't have had that ice cream. And then those feelings of guilt. Again, it was more, that was too much food.
I didn't really want that.
Next time I go for sushi, I need to assess before deciding if I want ice cream.
Yeah.
But then it was also like, well, we were with friends and we enjoyed a little like outing to DQ, and that was fun. And so, yeah, it's just, food is more than just fuel in that way as well. There's just different ways to look at it, but I always like to take a more positive curiosity spin on it, which is, that didn't make me feel good. Why? And is this something that I want to change for the future?
Yeah.
And that takes time.
That's a good perspective.
I got that.
Yeah.
That signaling.
I was like, wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
We're repeating ourselves.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye. No, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this. And yeah, appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next one.